Hi, it's Dorothy Guinan with Scrapbooking Quebec. Today I'm joining the Punched Out Thursday to Die For collaboration. We share ideas every Thursday on what to do with your punches and your dies. I'm going to put links to Ronnie's, Kathy's, Krista's, Rebecca's, and Sonia's channel below, so be sure to check out what they're up to. Here's what I'm going to be doing today, and I will be creating all of those embellishments with tools from my stash. Now here's the paper I'm going to be using. It's from Cartabella's Winter Market collection, and I'm about to show you two photos of tools. Now the first one are the tools that are kind of essential to create this page. You don't need the exact tools, but something similar. And in the second photo, there are 3 punches there. Now, you don't need these punches. I use them, and I will suggest substitutes in case you don't have them. And I'll put a list of all of the tools I use in the description box below in case you're interested. So here's what's on my desk. I did prepare a frame style foundation with 2 sheets of paper, and I gutted one of them. And there is a tutorial on my channel where I show you how to do that, so I will link that up below as well. I matted 2 photos, and I'm showing you the paper I have on my desk, including a piece of vellum and some metallic paper that I did dig out from my stash. I also have a handful of scraps because I will be doing some punch art. I have a tray full of small bits and bobs and this basket full of tools. Now the first thing I'm going to do is create a layered vertical border. So I'm cutting down 4 strips of paper. Now the measurements I'm going to put on the screen are for the visible border parts only. That's because at this point I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. So I'm cutting them a bit wider than I actually use them, and then I layer them up. There's another thing as well. These are all 12 inches long at this point, but the measurements on the screen indicate 11.5 inches. That's because once I adhere all of the 4 pieces together to create the border, it's only then that I trim it down to 11.5 inches. I just find it gives me a clean, more precise border doing it that way. So just be aware of that with regards to the measurements that are on the screen. So I'm going to place this on the page, and you're going to see I get out my photos and I place them there as well. Well, before I do that, of course, I do have to trim it down to 11.5 inches, but I do get out my photos, and I am going to need a journaling box. So when I get out the journaling box, what I'm going to get out is some graph paper. It's basically a project life card that I'm using, and then I end up matting it just like the photos. So I'm going to mat that with the same kind of charcoal cardstock there. I'm cutting it down, and it ends up being bigger than what I want to use it, so you're going to see me come in a moment and trim it down again. So all the time on the screen, it's for the final measurements, because in this case I just keep whittling it down until I finally get it to the size that I actually want it. So then I'm going to place these on the border. So I'm creating basically a vertical design here. My plan at this point is to have the the title on the right hand side, kind of jutting out in the middle. And what you're going to see me do in a moment is kind of create a shelf. So I end up cutting a few more strips of paper, and my idea is I'll place my title on these strips of paper. So I'm cutting down 3 strips of paper. Again, these are all at 12 inches long, and I'll put the final measurements on. I absolutely have no idea what I'm doing here at this point. I'm just kind of creating as I go along. I basically started this project with half a plan, so this is how I create when I have half a plan in my head. Anyway, I'm playing around with the placement here. All I know at this point is I want the word snow, the first part of the title, to be able to be placed on top of that shelf. Now before adhering anything, I do decide to apply a bit of ink. I'll write the ink color on the screen. It's a Stampin' Up ink. I'm not quite sure of it right now when I'm doing my voiceover, but I used a blending brush, and basically I know that in that area, that's where the main embellishment cluster is going to be, so I just wanted kind of a color foundation piece underneath that. So you can see I've got out my Big Shot, and I'm cutting out a bunch of circles here, and these eventually will be snowmen for my embellishment clusters. I will put measurements for what I'm creating, the punch art, on the screen a bit later on in the video when I actually adhere it to the page. So what I've done here is I cut out some circles, I've cut out some ovals. I'm using that square-ish label punch to cut out one square, and I cut it in half. And again, I'll get back to that later on. Off camera, I cut out a bunch of snowflakes in that metallic paper that I showed you earlier. Those are dies from Echo Park, new dies actually. So now what I've got to do before I actually start creating my embellishment clusters is finally make a commitment and adhere the border and the photos and this shelf to the page, because without that there, I can't really continue on. So that's what you see me doing now, and I'm kind of fussing about. At this point, I decide, you can see, to cut down that border. I'm just having it overlap the journaling box, and it's going to be tucked under the photo that's on the bottom left, and there isn't going to be a shelf that peeks out further on the left hand side of the page. So once I finally get all of this down, then I will get to the punch art. This takes me quite a bit of time. I'm sorry about this. Anyway, one thing I can point out, that the photo that's on the bottom left right now, it's just flat to the page, but at the very end you're going to notice I actually popped it up. So now I'm getting to the punch art. So what I'm going to do is start in the bottom left hand corner. So you can see I had that larger circle, and it's kind of squared off on two sides, so to speak, of the circle. That's going to go right up in the corner, right on top of the white part of the foundation page. And I'm adding a bit of ink around the edge, and that same ink that I used earlier on the foundation page. I'm using a big brush there. I should have used a smaller one, but I didn't have one handy, so I was just too lazy to go get one. Anyway, I ended up making a mistake and having to do it again. That's why I recommend a smaller brush. You can see I punched out two circles, 1/2 inch black circles. Those are the eyes, and smaller ones in white for the middle of the eyes. I just cut myself out with scissors a triangle for the carrot nose, and then I'm punching out little tiny dots, 5 of them, and that's going to be the mouth of the snowman. Now off camera, I adhere all of those pieces with a liquid adhesive, and now what you see me doing is starting to work on the embellishment cluster up by the journaling box. This time you'll get to see me struggle with the liquid adhesive. So I'm adding a little bit of ink around the edges again of the snowman in that same blue ink. Again, just to add a little bit of contrast, because it's kind of white on white. And what I'm doing is I have 2 circles here. So the big one goes at the bottom, like building a snowman. The next one goes on top. That's going to be the head. Now what I'm doing is taking that small oval and tucking it behind the head. And then I'm taking that label that I cut in half, and I'm tucking it behind the oval. So that looks like a hat on the snowman's head. If you do not have a label punch like I have, you can simply cut yourself out a square. Easy enough. Now what you see me doing is looking through this 6x6 paper pad, the scraps of it, to create a scarf for the snowman. So I'm cutting this down at 1/2 of an inch, and I have a punch. I'm not sure the name of it. It will be listed in the description box below. It's from Stampin' Up, and it's got 2 different style banners, and each one of them there are 3 options, 3 widths. So I did it at the smallest, and I basically cut out a little banner, and then I cut out another little one. So you see the longest one's on top, and the smaller part is kind of sticking up from behind, so it looks like a little scarf. And obviously, if you don't have a little banner punch like this, you can just cut it out with a pair of scissors. Easy, easy. I did the same thing for the carrot nose, but this time it's upside down. It's like the snowman is looking up in the sky. And then I punched out a few more of those little dots for his belly. So now I'm adhering everything to the page, basically building my snowman here. And I also added a little bit of ink to that scarf, just in a charcoal gray ink. So you can see all I did was add little dots of liquid glue on top of the snowman, and then I placed the tiny bits on top of that. Now what you see me doing is basically building this little tiny snowman on top. Now this one's just going to be his head, and it's going to be peeking out from behind the journaling box. Again, the small circle, then the oval behind it, and then behind that, the half label, so it looks like a little hat. So I'm tucking him behind, and I'm going to do the very same thing. I'm just going to add a little nose. I forgot to mention the snowman just above the title there. I simply drew on his mouth, a little smile mouth with a fine tip black marker. Now you see me putting the title down. Now these are alphas that were in my stash. I will write them in the description box below. You can see I put them on wax paper to play with placement. I have Snow Fun, and again, I stopped the camera. I don't know if I actually adhered them at this point. If I did, anyway, whenever I adhere the title, I start by adhering the title, and then I stop the camera and continue. Now what you see me doing is tucking in these snowflakes that I cut off camera when I was cutting out the rest of the circles and all of that. Those are from Echo Park, those dies. And I also have this punch here, which is a Holly Builder punch. There's a little bow in it. Now, obviously, if you don't have this punch, all you have to do is tie yourself a little ribbon and adhere it to the snowman if you would like for him to have a little bow tie. So now I've got out this adhesive called Sticky Specs by Ecstasy Crafts, and that's what I'm using to adhere my snowflakes around the page, just in each one of the clusters, and the main cluster being the one around the journaling box and the title. This adhesive kind of picks up adhesive onto detailed pieces. So there you have it. My page is done. Super, super easy. All I did off camera was my journaling, of course. I did add some enamel dots to the middle of each one of those snowflakes. And I also, like I mentioned earlier, popped up that photo at the bottom. I just added 2 extra layers of cardstock underneath to raise it up a bit. I felt like there was no real focal point. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd greatly appreciate a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to Scrapbooking Quebec, I would be thrilled to have you as a subscriber. Don't forget to check out the other participants. Their links are in the description box below, and have a great day. Bye-bye.